So I have a whole case of them, a whole shoebox, and then I also and then I have these. I'm trying to think where else my other ones are.
Mark has
one that I have some in my luggage.
I love hearing about your guys' collections, but like I said, we have a lot to do today, so we're all gonna whoop, and let's do 5-second recap. Remember, not really 5 seconds, although Mrs. Knife could try to get what happened? I don't know. What happened? My screen. All right, hold on. Timeout. Something happened to my screen. Anyways, Wild Wild West, remember, it was during the early 1800s. It started technically in like 1803, which is when the Louisiana Purchase was bought. It added like 14 states in what today's world would be. It was bought by Thomas Jefferson for $15 million. I'm sorry, my screen went crazy. Remember, we ended when we were talking about Lewis and Clark, that with their 50-person crew, they were heading west to explore because Thomas Jefferson was like, yeah, I don't have time to go explore. I need someone else to do it for me. And remember, this is an informational text. We're getting real facts, even though there are fun illustrations along with it. So we left off at the end of oh, wait, I got to share my screen now. I'm so sorry. I'm just looking at the screen myself without sharing it. No yawning, anyone. I just saw someone yawn. We're not allowed to yawn because yawns are contagious. And if you yawn, then I'm going to want to yawn. All right, but seriously. So we ended right here on how America grew. We are on paragraph 7, so I'm going to start reading. There will be discussion questions along the way, so make sure you're paying attention. But like I said, we do have a lot to get through, so if I'm going kind of fast, I apologize. So, oh yeah, remember we just talked about how Sacagawea helps Lewis and Clark because when they came across Native American tribes, the Native Americans saw Sacagawea and they knew it was like a peaceful moment and it wasn't like, not peaceful. The opposite of peaceful. I don't know what that word is right now. 7. Lewis and Clark kept detailed journals of the plants and animals they discovered. They wrote about the Native Americans they met. Along the way, they sent boxes of seeds, bones, animal skins, and even live prairie dogs back to Thomas Jefferson. So remember, Thomas Jefferson sent them to go explore. So they can't just be walking around having a great time. They have kind of like a job to do. They have to keep detailed notes of what they're seeing because plants in the East are going to be different than plants in the West. Same with animals that are native. In New York, they probably don't have like rattlesnakes chilling around all the time, but out in the desert areas, they do. So they were actually keeping logs and sending things back to Thomas Jefferson for him to check out and things like that. After Lewis and Clark's successful 2-year expedition, many explorers, scientists, map makers, and missionaries headed west on the Oregon Trail. And if you recall, let's step back. Remember, the Oregon Trail was the red one. It started in Independence, Missouri, and it headed this way. So remember, the Oregon Trail was the red one. Fur traders, often called mountain men, went west along the Oregon Trail too. These men trapped beavers and other small animals. They also traded many goods with Native Americans, such as rifles and steel knives for more beaver pelts. Mountain men used their knowledge of the land to guide soldiers and explorers. So, mountain men were people that were kind of like lived out and about. They weren't necessarily like going to build a home. They were just all out and about fur trading. And can anyone tell me why the mountain men were able to trade with the Native Americans their rifles and steel knives? Can someone like use what we know about what Native Americans had or didn't have and tell me like why would Native Americans be interested in rifles and steel knives and stuff? Anyone want to raise your hand in the raise your hand button? Jacqueline, I see your hand is up.
Because Indians never really have had like steel knives and guns and stuff before.
Right. So the Native Americans, they weren't from Great Britain and they hadn't like seen factories, things where they'd been made out of steel. They didn't have that. So a Native American had never seen a rifle before. So then once they saw it, they wanted it and they were willing to trade some of their stuff. So the Native Americans didn't have stuff and then the fur traders did. So guess what? That's how things trade. I have something that you want. You have something that I want. Trade happened.
Where would I find the meeting password? Because my computer just like froze and then it kept looping your voiceover. It was
weird. Say that again. You want what?
So my whole computer froze. It kept looping your voiceover, and I'm trying to figure out where the password is in case that it happens again. Because if it does happen again, I'm just gonna close up this computer and get on my mom's. So I'm trying to find the password for it.
Okay, so the pin is 15392
Thank you.
Dylan, that's so helpful. All right, we're gonna leave this little side burst over here with Did You Know? Lewis and Clark's journey still has an effect on our lives today. Many of their routes are used for railways and highways. Their plant specimens are studied by scientists. We even use some of Lewis and Clark's place names, like Camp Fortunate in Montana. So something that happened literally like 200 years ago, still having an effect on us today. Next page. Presenting James Beckworth. And look, you see these little lines around here? That means this is going to be a sidebar. Okay, so let's read this sidebar about James Beckworth. Born in 1789, James Beckworth was a famous African-American mountain man. So remember, he lives in the mountains, he traps fur, he can guide people around because he knows the area really, really well. He worked as a fur trapper, guide, and translator. He lived among the Crow Indians, where he learned to speak their language. Around 1850, Beckworth discovered a trail through the Sierra Nevada mountains that was good enough for wagons. Many settlers and gold miners traveled to California. Many settlers and gold miners traveling to California used his route. The Beckworth Pass is named after him. So this man, he was bilingual, which is fabulous. He lived with long Native Americans, so he was able to translate with Native Americans and English, or do they speak English? Whatever language they're speaking, they speak French. I should probably know that, but I don't. So anyways, and he was a fur trapper, he was a guide, and he found a really awesome pathway that people were able to, like, not so much of a shortcut, but a shorter way to get to California, and it's named after him, the Beckworth Pass. So that's just a sidebar, something to learn about him. Mia, is your hand up?
What does fur trapper mean?
A fur trapper, it means that they trap animals and then they kill them for their fur. You're trapping animals with fur.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so now the sidebar's over and we're continuing on with paragraph 9. The trails and posts. Remember, can someone remind me what posts are? We're not talking about Instagram posts, and we're not talking about the little fence posts. What posts are we talking about, Abigail?
Like little stops.
Yeah, little stops along the way to help people out. Maybe they got some sugar or some water, some place to rest, some flour, things you might need. The trails and posts used by these explorers and mountain men guided the pioneers who came to settle the land west of the Mississippi River. Men, women, and children heading west walked, pushed handcarts, and rode horses and in wagons. Few knew how hard and long the journey would be. Remember, all these people that had already been west were like, oh my gosh, it's so great, come west. So people went west, but they didn't really realize how hard it was going to be. And it was a very hard journey because remember, they didn't have paved streets and stuff like that. They literally had to walk, or they had to push things, or, maybe ride their horse for a little bit. But it was a lot of work to go west. It was not a simple journey. And now our next subtitle in our story is Moving West. So we're about to hear more about moving west. Do you think you could walk all day, every day, for weeks and weeks? Think it to your brain. Are you walking all day, every day for weeks and weeks? Mrs. Kneifel's not doing that. I need better cardio. So go these people who are really determined to make it there. That's exactly what kids who walked west with their parents had to do. Depending on where people started and how far west they went, the entire journey could be a few hundred miles or as long as 2,000 miles. So some children actually ended up walking 2,000 miles while they were children, and that would take months. Every day they had to walk and walk and walk 2,000 miles, or it could only be a few hundred miles. It depends on where you went. So some people's journeys were farther than others. It could take 5 months to get to their new home. No wonder they often went through many pairs of shoes. Get it? That's kind of a little bit of humor. If you're walking 2,000 miles, you're going to wear out your shoes really quick. Newspapers' advertisements made the West sound amazing. They encouraged many people from the eastern United States to move, often these reports did not give a complete picture of the daily hardships in the Western life. So remember, these advertisements and the people already west, they were saying just how lovely it is, the big open land, great for farming, all this stuff, but they were forgetting all the hard things about it, like the journey and not having maybe the supplies you need and maybe the loneliness. There's not a ton of people out there. So there's so many hardships that they didn't mention. They were only hearing the good stuff. So a lot of people went west not knowing how hard it was going to be. Mia, do you have a question?
There was a little caption at the bottom or something. There was a little saying.
Oh, sorry. Frontier quick quote. Those who will come after us will extend and fill up the canvas we began. Thomas Jefferson, 1805. So that was a little quote by Thomas Jefferson. That's something he said. And that's a direct quote. Remember, that's what we're learning about grammar this week. Quotation. So that's something Thomas Jefferson said. And he's just saying those that are going to come after, so a canvas, that's like what you paint on, those big white things. So Thomas Jefferson is like, we have a blank canvas of the West. We bought it. And the people that are coming after us will make the canvas, like a painting. They're going to build it up. They're going to make it something. It just won't be blank anymore. So that was just a little quick quote. Thanks for pointing that out, Mia. I totally did not even see it. All right, we are continuing on with paragraph 12, which is still part of the moving west chunk. People went west for many reasons, not just for gold. Some pioneers dreamed of owning their own farm or opening businesses, which we already know that about, that they wanted land because we learned that from our story last week, correct? The Mormons went... Okay, that's fine, Mark. The Mormons went in search of religious freedom. Others moved west for patriotic reasons. They believed that it was good for America to settle all of its land. So look, gold was one reason. Owning a farm, owning a business. Mormons is just another type of religion. Lots of Mormons settled in like Utah. Like today, if you went to Utah, there is a very large population of Mormons, and it is just another type of religion out there. And so religious freedom and patriotic reasons. Like someone was like, America needs to spread as far wide as possible. So that's why they moved. So many reasons why people moved. At this time, Great Britain still controlled part of what is now the United States. In 1846, the United States and Great Britain agreed that all of the Oregon would belong to the United States. Right away, thousands of people traveled west on the Oregon Trail. So remember, 1803 is when Thomas Jefferson bought the Louisiana Purchase, doubled the United States, but it wasn't until 1846 that Great Britain finally let go of Oregon and all of Oregon, which is at the very top west corner of the United States, and the United States was able to get all of that. The frontier wagon. Pioneer families moved west by wagon, which we already learned about. Remember the covered train wagons? Everyone, they're in their low wagons with their wooden wheels. A pioneer wagon was light and small. It had to be to make it through narrow mountain passes. The wagon had a waterproof canvas cover. So that's the top of it. Because its cover reminded people of ship sails, they named a wagon a prairie schooner. A schooner is a type of ship that has sails. Some wagon covers had names or slogans such as Oregon or Bust painted on the side. So remember, we learned about slogans, catchy little things. So people would paint on their little canvas like Oregon or Bust, like we're going to Oregon or it's nothing. Like it's all or nothing is kind of what that means. So they're just adding a little bit of humor to their everyday life. And remember, they can't be super, super heavy because horses are pulling them. So they can't be, crazy, crazy heavy. Otherwise, horses wouldn't be able to pull them. And they also can't be very wide. They have to be narrow so they can get through mountains. Did you know? You can see miles of wagon ruts along the Oregon Trail in places like Gurney's, Wyoming. The wagon rails created trenches in solid rock, some up to 6 feet deep. So even today in 2021, you could potentially go see where people traveled the Oregon Trail with a wagon because how eroded or how many wagons went across, it actually went into the solid rock. So today you could go find that if you wanted to. That's awesome, Mark. Get packing. Remember, you got to pack your stuff. Your whole life has to fit into this wagon that you are moving west with. Most pioneers use oxen to pull their wagons. An ox is kind of like a bull, kind of like a cow. They're very strong. big animals. At the end of the journey, oxen could be used. At the end of the journey, oxen could be used to plow fields. They were strong enough to pull 2,000 pounds. So that's a lot of pounds, but even though they can pull 2,000 pounds, they probably couldn't pull 2,000 pounds, for 2,000 miles. So you still couldn't necessarily pack 2,000 pounds worth of stuff. A wagon carried everything a pioneer needed to begin a new life. Pioneers usually took equipment to repair the wagon. That makes sense. If your wheel's going to break, you need somehow to fix it. Farm tools. Okay, you need that because when you get to the end of your journey, you want to farm. Seeds for planting and personal items such as shoes and blankets. Obviously, shoes and blankets are going to be a really important thing because you're going to be doing a lot of walking for shoes and blankets for at night. Because even if you're in the desert area, it's going to be hot during the day, but once the sun goes down, it could be rather cold. So you still need blankets to sleep with. They also bought food such as flour, bacon, coffee, and rice. There were no grocery stores if they forgot something. Trading posts along the way sold some food and other items, but everything was expensive and often sold out. So they had those posts, but guess what? Things are still going to be pricey, and they may not even have what you want. So those posts were nice, but they weren't always as accessible as what people wanted them to be. Families often packed too much. Then they had to lighten their loads along the trail so the oxen wouldn't get worn out with too much weight. Without oxen, pioneers would have to carry their belongings. Furniture like trunks and beds were the first things left behind. One pioneer left her apron and 3 pieces of bacon. Eventually, there was so much garbage along the trails that people didn't need a guide or a map to find their way. So that's crazy to think. Obviously, I don't know about you, if you ever go on a trip, if you overpack. Mrs. Kneifel, I'm an overpacker. I mean, I pack like 6 outfits a day for vacation, even though, you only change once. But I love to overpack. That's just because I'm a worrier. So these people, it would be hard to condense. You're taking your whole life and you're putting it into a wagon. So obviously you bring too much. So along the way, they're like, the oxen are getting tired. Let's take this out. Let's take this out. Let's take this out. So then so many people are traveling and traveling. And then so many people are taking stuff out. You can literally see the path because there's debris, beds and trunks and all this stuff. You don't even need a map because the line of litter or used furniture is showing you the way. This lady left along an apron and 3 pieces of bacon. I don't think 3 pieces of bacon is going to make much of a difference. 3 pieces of bacon probably weighs like 2 ounces. So people were just really desperate. Yes.
You think that the pioneers would get so hungry and starving that they would actually eat the oxen?
I don't really know. Because you really needed your oxen, but I suppose if an oxen was hurt or the oxen couldn't travel anymore, then what up? Oh yeah, it's not here. I sent everything home. So anyways, I suppose like an oxen could like break its leg or something and there's no veterinarians to fix it. So they might eat them then. But also think about how large an oxen is. If an oxen is that large, how are you going to carry that meat with you? And so I'm going to go on a limb and say probably not unless it was like a dire need. This was mainly to save space. Oh, wait, no, sorry. Let's go back to 18. Unless someone was sick or the weather was bad, people walked besides their wagons. This was mainly to save space in the wagon for food and to take a load and to make the load lighter for oxen. Also, the wagons were bouncy and uncomfortable. The good thing about bouncing was that pioneers used the motion to churn butter. So, there's a good thing about everything. So remember, these are wooden wheels and bumpy roads, okay? They're not nice and paved and stuff. So they was so bouncy in the wagon, no one wanted to ride in it because it was so uncomfortable. So unless you were sick or there was a giant storm, everyone was walking. But apparently it bounced so much that you could churn butter. Fun fact, you guys could make butter yourself at home. If you get some heavy whipping cream from the store and throw it in a glass mason jar or Tupperware or something that's solid and shake it forever, eventually you're going to make butter. So you guys should try that out. Sorry, there's a then and now. Then pioneers' families spent $500 to $1,000 on supplies for their long western journey. Remember, $500, that is a ton of money back then. Now, people pay about $400 to fly from the East Coast to the West Coast, and they get there in 6 hours. So people used to spend about, at most, $1,000 to make it west, and it took 5 months. Now, you could fly from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast in 6 hours. Okay, that's like a fourth of a day. So crazy to think about. James, is your hand up, bud?
I forgot what I was going to say.
Okay. All right. So next, we're going to talk about the wagon train, which we talked a teeny bit about in our short read from last week. Hold on. Timeout. Sorry. Timeout. All right. Sorry. Wagon train. Many pioneers began their journey in the frontier town of Independence, Missouri. Remember, that was on our map. It was like, well, in Missouri, and it was that black dot on the map from the first page. Where they formed wagon trains, pioneers believed a large group would keep them safe. There would also be many skills in the group that might come in handy on the journey. So that's a good thing to think about. This is skills. Like maybe someone is really good at carpentry, like making the wheels, and then maybe someone's like really good at working with animals. So having people be good at different things was also helpful. And it was helpful to be, we talked about traveling in numbers, how that can be good. It can keep them a little bit safer. Did you know? On a good day, a wagon covered about 25 miles. But on days of difficult river crossings and mountain paths, the wagon might travel only 25 miles or only 1 mile an entire day. Only 1 mile an entire day. We could probably walk, just regular old walking. We could probably walk a mile, regular speed walking in like 12 minutes. And they only might have covered a mile in 1 day because how hard some of the river crossings and stuff were. So that's why it took them so long. But some days they were able to cover 25 miles, which is a pretty good distance. But still, that would take forever. We're going to finish paragraph 20, and then we will read the sidebar of Independence Rock. A wagon train could be as long as 100 wagons or more. A captain led the wagon train. The captain could be the oldest man or a man who owned the most wagons. He decided when the group started, stopped for breaks, and how the group would cross a river. A scout, usually a mountain man, helped the captain. He rode ahead of the wagon train to select tent sites and make sure they were going in the right direction. So I personally would want to be just the person in the train. I don't want to have to make decisions. I would just want to follow. But there was someone that was like in charge of the train. Someone had to be the leader. So they would decide which way they were going and stuff. Now let's read about Independence Rock. Time out. All right. Independence Rock. Independence Rock represented the halfway point on the trail. Ooh, that would be great to reach halfway. I don't know if you guys know this, total sidebar. The halfway of school was a few days ago because today's the 93rd day of school. So on day 90, it was the halfway point of school. So Mrs. Kneifel loves countdowns and places and halfways and stuff like that. So I would have been really excited to make it to Independence Rock. Children and their parents looked forward to carving their names and leaving messages on Independence Rock. It was significant because people needed to reach it by July 4th or risk getting caught in mountain storms farther west. The giant rock rose 128 feet high and to some looked like a beach whale. If you ever visit Independent Rocks in Wyoming, you can see the names of many pioneers and the dates they were there. That would be so cool to see Independence Rock. Mrs. Kneifel should put that on their list and to see that. So they didn't just want to reach Independent Rock for fun, just to get there and be halfway. They wanted to reach it by a certain date because if they were behind that certain date, that just means that weather was changing and they might get caught up in bad storms and stuff. And obviously, if you have oxen and children and, a covered wagon, you don't want to be caught in any unnecessary storms, right? That would just be a big mess. Trail dangers. We talked about this last week as well. So many dangers along the way. Pioneers faced many dangers along the trail. Rain washed out roads. Buffalo could frighten cattle, which would make them run and crash wagons. Leaving too late in the season could trap pioneers and snow on the way. River crossings were always risky. If the river was shallow enough, they could wade across the current and rocks with their oxen. Sometimes they turned wagons into boats by taking the wheels off and emptying them. Other times, families built rafts big enough to hold a wagon by cutting down trees and tying them together. At large rivers, former traders and Native Americans ran toll bridges and ferries where families could pay to have their belongings floated across. Many pioneers were afraid that Native Americans would harm them. They had heard stories of kidnapping or attacks. Fighting did happen, especially after the mid-1800s, but many Native Americans wanted to trade with pioneers, and many shared their knowledge with pioneers, such as the best places to cross rivers and where to look for food. Disease was the biggest danger on the trail. Many pioneers died of smallpox and mumps. I don't know what that word is. Another disease, which comes from drinking polluted water, caused the most deaths on the trail. So obviously, oh my goodness, there's so many dangers. Not just your wagon breaking, not just you falling and breaking, but getting sick because there wasn't medicine, there wasn't doctors. This is also the 1800s. So a lot of times if people got sick, they just passed away because there wasn't any way for them to get better. They were Native Americans. I mean, to get across the river, you might have had to pay Native Americans, or you might have had to build a boat just to get your cattle across. That would be so much work. So you would spend a day just making a little boat just to get across. So you definitely lost some time, but the dangers were definitely insane. The daily schedule. All right, so now we're going to move on. What was a day like as we're traveling west? What's the day like? After an early breakfast of cornmeal mush, Johnny cakes, or cold biscuits, as well as coffee and bacon, the wagons headed out. Each day, a different family led the way. Wagon trains took a break called nooning about midday. While the oxen rested, pioneers enjoyed a cold meal of beans or bacon. Children gathered buffalo chips or cow manure to use for fuel on the evening campfire. Gross. So they didn't just have time to be chopping wood. So they took the manure, or that is like, the potty from the cow, and they would collect that and throw it into the fire, and it would help the fire burn for later. So they ate breakfast really early. They traveled all day, and then at noon they took a break because obviously the oxen can't, go for 12 hours and so on. At mid-afternoon, the train would set out again and travel until early evening. Scouts went ahead of the train to find a pasture for the oxen and a large flat area for the wagon. When the wagons arrived, they would set up in a circle. The circle made a corral to keep the oxen inside to graze. Tents were set up and campfires built. So that's pretty much what it was like. You traveled all morning, took a break at noon, traveled the rest of the afternoon. In the evening, you would circle up. You can actually see how they would make a circle, which is really smart because it keeps the animals inside. It's not like they have fences to keep the animals inside. And it would also kind of help protect them. And if you're at the beginning or at the end, you might not be able to see that person. But if you're in a circle, it'd be a lot easier to get to people. The fires would be in the middle. It's just overall safer, and it makes a lot of sense for them to be in a circle. Mexican-American War. This is another sidebar. Remember, a little sidebar here. Many Americans believed it was their right to settle the land all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Sorry, had to admit someone. All the way to the Pacific Ocean, even if Mexicans or Native Americans lived there. This led to the Mexican-American War in 1846. The Republic of Texas became a state in 1845, but Mexico believed that Texans belonged to it. Mexico went to war to get it back. When Mexico lost, it had to give its territories to America for $15 million. That territories include the present-day state of California, Nevada, Utah, parts of New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, and Wyoming. So, that's just another part. How the United States got even bigger. They were, there was a war about it, and then they lost their land. They lost. So then all these parts went to America, make America what it is today as well. Trail food, which also up here at the very top, we cornmeal mush. If you've ever had cornbread, which Mrs. Knife loves some cornbread. Cornmeal, it's just like corn ground up, and so that'd be probably mixed with some water. It'd be mush. Johnny cakes would probably be like floury pancakes. We know what biscuits are. That would be flour and water, basically. And we know what coffee is, and we know what bacon is, so that would be some food. Beans, we know what beans are. Those are beans are travel well and stay well, so that would be a good food. But trail food. Women learned to bake bread on the trail using Dutch ovens over campfires. Cooking was usually done in the evenings, and leftovers were eaten for breakfast and lunch. As you can imagine, nothing was wasted on this trip. If something wasn't eaten for breakfast, it was going to be eaten for lunch. If something wasn't eaten at lunch, it was going to be eaten for dinner. No one's just throwing out food because food was so little. And guess what? They probably were eating the same thing every single day, and they just had to live with it. A typical pioneer diet consisted of bacon, ham, rice, dried fruit, bread, coffee, and tea. They also ate wild game like antelope, rabbit, and birds. So wild game means things that are like shot in the wild, like pigs. You know, those are like raised on farms, and that's how you get like ham and bacon and stuff like that. But a bird, someone as they're, traveling along, they might have shot a bird and then they could cook that. Same with antelope and rabbits and stuff. Some families brought a milking cow with them to provide fresh milk. But then remember, you got to feed that cow too. So there's like gives and takes for that. Pioneers also traded with Native Americans for meat and vegetables. Everyone ate a hard bread called hardtack. Hardtack didn't spoil on the long trip because it had no butter or lard. Lard is like fat that you get off of like cooking bacon. Pioneers often dipped their hardtack into hot drinks to soften it up before trying to bite into it. So it's just a bread they made, and it didn't have anything that could make it go bad. So guess what? It could last a really, really long time. But if it lasts a really long time, that could be really, really hard. So they really didn't have that much of a diet. But the point is they had food, right? I mean, I guess if you're traveling for 5 months, 2,000 miles, you're happy to have food regardless of what it is. So I don't think you had the option to be a picky eater back in the day. Not that any of you are, I'm just saying. And lastly, let's read this little excerpt on the Pony Express. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of the Pony Express. I'm sure some of you have heard of the Pony Express. Mrs. Kneifel has heard of the Pony Express. So let's read about the Pony Express. It was hard for pioneers to communicate with their families back east. Obviously, there's no like major postal service. There's no phones. They left letters at trading posts and even under rocks along the trail, hoping that wagons going east would take them. In April 1860, the Pony Express began delivering mail from St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento, California in only 10 days. The riders changed horses every 10 miles, and after 70 miles, a new rider took over. So the Pony Express means fast, and a pony, we know what a horse is, but a horse express sounds silly, so it's Pony Express. But a horse would run as fast as it could for 10 miles. 10 miles isn't incredibly long, and then it would get a break. So the horses weren't run to death. And then every 70 miles, we would get a new rider. And it was just able to take letters more fast from Missouri to California. Instead of, a 5-month long journey with wagons, they have these fast horses, they have these mail carriers, and you were just able to get mail back and forth. 10 days is still a really long time, though, in case you're wondering. 20. Finding fresh water on the trail was not easy. Rain barrels on wagons collected water, but they never had enough. Pioneers had no choice but to drink from creeks and rivers just like their cattle. One Roman wrote about sucking on a rag soaked in vinegar when there was no water. Another wrote about straining pond water through the end of a wagon cover. So these people, even back then, knew it could be dangerous to drink just water from ponds and rivers and stuff. You don't know what's going to happen. But, they just didn't necessarily have that fresh water. The rain, it only rained so much. You could only collect so much. People had to do what they had to do.
How hard is it to just get like a bucket of water and just boil it?
Well, you got to think, what would their buckets be?
True.
You know what I mean? They could use
I mean, also at the same time, they did have gold, so that would actually probably mean iron, and they can make like an iron.
Right, and they had to cook in stuff like Dutch ovens for whatchamacallits, bread and stuff, but they probably only had so many pots, and then you would have to get the water, then you would have to, have a fire and then boil it. They may not have known necessarily that's how to get fresh water. I don't know about that one. And when you also boil like the impurities and stuff out of water, some of the water goes down. So they could do that. It would just be a long process, but I'm sure people probably did do that, but it still probably wasn't enough because they only had so many things that were even able to be boiled, because in the evenings they had to be cooking their food. So, but I'm sure some people did do that.
I bet you the kids could just do that because if the kids are doing so much work, they could just get the kids,
right,
tell them to get some water if they go by a creek, and just tell them to get the water, start a fire, and boom, just boil it. Just give them
Right,
an
yeah,
extra.
I don't know exactly what they did, but apparently, according to our informational text story, it was not the easiest thing to get or the easiest thing to come by. And our final paragraph. In spite of all these hardships, the pioneers managed to make the journey and settle new towns throughout the West. Their strength, innovation, and adventurous spirits helped shape the United States as we know it today. So go those pioneers, because if those pioneers wouldn't have made the 2,000-mile, 5-month-long journey, maybe today wouldn't be what it is today. We know what strength is, you know, your not just muscle, but your inner strength, you know, to make it somewhere. Can anyone remember what innovation means? We learned about innovation way in the beginning of the year. Mrs. Kneifel likes the word innovation. I like what it means. Does anyone happen to remember what innovation means? We talked about it during the Inventors at Work section.
Creativity.
Kind of like that, Dylan. Presley, you want to tell me?
Motivation.
Sorry, I had to swallow. So, remember, innovation would be, if I had this invention, the original iPhone is nothing like the iPhone today. So the iPhone was created years and years ago, but this iPhone is different than that iPhone because it was innovation. It wasn't a new invention, the iPhone. It's just a better and bettering and better. So people,
Improvement.
yeah, improvement basically. So people, you know, like the mail system, people left letters underneath rocks, but then eventually there was innovation of the Pony Express, which was made because people already knew how you could get things back and forth, but they made it better. So remember, innovation is when you're taking something that's already known and improving it, making it better, making it more useful and stuff. So innovation was super important, and also adventurous spirit. I am sure it was quite an adventure to get from one place to another. You couldn't be scared about things along the way. So let's backtrack a minute. So in this story, it is definitely categorized by subtitles and different categories. And then there's also tons and tons of sidebars. And remember, the sidebars give us that extra bit of information that adds to the story, but isn't actually part of the story. And remember, this is all informational text, real life facts. It just has great illustrations to go with. I really like this map. And, you know, it shows this was Independence, Missouri, and it travels that way. So the first part was why or where was the Wild West? And then we talked about how America grew. These are two little sidebars that we also had, the then and now, which was money comparison. So here we're really actually comparing. Did you know sidebar? We had presenting James Beckworth, and this just gave us extra information about a trail moving west, how people actually got west. A frontier wagon. So this was a very tiny section, but it just told you a little bit more about the wagon. Another did you know sidebar. And here's another compare and contrast with then and now. And then get packing. I like how this is called get packing. It's not just how they packed. It's called get packing. So I think that the author also had some fun with this story, but it's get packing. And this section was all about what they had to pack. Then the wagon train. This was another kind of shorter one, but it's just explaining more about how the people actually traveled. Another did you know sidebar. This was a big sidebar, not a big sidebar, but an important sidebar about Independence Rock and the halfway point. Trail dangers, which we definitely learned a lot about last week, but you know, there's so many trail dangers. The daily schedule. I like how they added the daily schedule in here. I think you know, this daily schedule is nothing like your daily schedule or like my daily schedule, that's for sure. This is another sidebar about how America got even more land. Trail food, which there was some other things about food throughout the story, but this is just a definite, hey, this is what they're eating, and guess what? You really don't have another choice. Oh, I also think this illustration was really helpful to show how the circle was. Obviously, there's not 100 wagons here like there could be, but it just shows how it would. All the animals are right here staying in and how they could be fire. So not every single tent had to have their own fire. They could share, you know, which would be helpful for supplies and stuff like that. And then our last sidebar was about the Pony Express. And then they ended with this nice little italic saying like, hey, if they didn't go through what they then went through, maybe we wouldn't have what we have. So does anyone have any questions over what we read today? Mia.
I forgot what Oregon means.
It's a state.
Oh.
The Oregon Trail is like it goes to Oregon. Oregon is way up here. It's in the top of the or maybe that's Washington. Let's look. The United States map.
It's the second state. It's below Washington.
Okay, so it's Washington, then Oregon, then California. Okay? So, anyways, the Oregon Trail, it takes you to Oregon. Is all. All right. Any other questions? So here, Mia, like the Oregon Trail's red, so it took you to present day Oregon. Okay, where my little mouse is. That's kind of.
Did anyone just get a lot of static, or is that just me?
I did, but I don't know why.
I did a load.
All right. What other questions do we have? All right. If we don't have other questions, don't get off yet. Let me explain. You do not have homework tonight, but tomorrow is a e-learning day. So no lives tomorrow. So you will have a reading assignment tomorrow. The assignment is going to go along with this story, okay? So you're going to have an assignment to do Thursday. We're going to get back on. There will be lives Thursday. We're going to answer some collaborative discussion questions together and stuff. And then you'll have the quiz, the 5-question quiz on Thursday. But tomorrow, you will have an assignment on Google Classroom. It'll be posted by 8 a.m., okay? Yes, Mia?
Will we be having the 10-question quiz?
Yes, that'll be on Friday.
Okay.
And we'll prepare more for that on Thursday as well, okay? So you are free to go. If you have any questions, though, now's the time to ask. No homework today. You will have an assignment tomorrow, okay? Make sure you get it done. It needs to be done by Thursday, okay? So we're going to be reviewing it on Thursday, so make sure you get it done. Thank you guys for participating and listening. I know it was a lot of listening to Mrs. Kneifel, but we just had to get it done. It's a long story this week. But you are free to go. Thank you, thank you.
Peace out.
Bye.
Did I miss something?
I don't think so.
I left and you started a sentence as soon as I left.
Oh, I was probably just reviewing.
Oh, all right, bye.
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 Bye. Bye, guys. See you later.